Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Coley, and I work with Artswell at Triangle Artworks. Thank you for being here for our artist residency program today. We have a lot of information that we can share from our panelists, and we thank you so much for joining us today. So first, I'm going to go ahead and allow the panelists to introduce themselves. So I will start with Shaylee.
Hi, everybody. I am Shali. It rhymes with Raleigh, so it's a good thing I
Yes,
moved here. Um,
yes.
and I am the artistic director of Shali Dance Works. We
Mhm.
are a nonprofit dance theater company dedicated to inspiring people of all abilities, social backgrounds, and cultures and generations with the transformative power of dance.
Mhm.
And I'll just share that the information I'm going to be sharing today kind of follows my trajectory from being a dancer to a choreographer to being an artistic director, and then the president of a nonprofit. So I've had residencies at all stages of that. So I'm glad to be here with you all and share.
Perfect. Thank you, Shali. And I apologize that I didn't get that name pronunciation correct the first time. So I appreciate
No
that.
worries, Tiffany. I've lived all over the place, and I
Yeah.
absolutely love that everywhere I've lived, people have a different variation of my name. I
Mhm.
love it. So, yeah, no worries.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to Anna Lee.
Thank you, Tiffany, and
Hi.
thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'm Anna Lee. I'm the creative director at Art Space, which is a visual arts center located in downtown Raleigh. And we are currently celebrating 25 years of residencies at Art Space. So, for those of you who are familiar with us or not, the majority of our building, it's a 30,000 square foot building. Is leased artist studio space that we provide at a subsidized rate, but we do have 3 dedicated spaces for year-long residency programs. Those include our emerging artist in residence program, as well as our newest residency, which is our HBCU residency program.
Mhm.
We also invite visiting artists for more project-based residencies at Art Space through our Summer Artist in Residence program and our Universal Access Artist in Residence program. Um, as creative director, I have the opportunity to curate exhibitions at Art Space, to help plan educational programming, to work closely with our artists who are tenants in our space. But I have to say, our residencies bring me immense joy. I've seen so many artists grow and thrive through those programs, and I'm really excited to share more with you today about them.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. And then last but not least, we'll move it over to Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wilkie, and I've been a full-time artist for 2 years. Really just entering the art world when I became a full-time artist. I'm a textile artist, and I try and have 2 residencies a year. So I'm here to talk about those residencies.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate all of you for being here, and particularly our panelists to share their knowledge and expertise on all things residencies. I just wanted to go over a couple of things. I'm going to ask them some questions, and then at the end or during the presentation, if you come up with things that you would like to ask, they may be answered during the presentation, during the discussion. You can do that by entering your question in the chat. If you're a person that would like to actually tell us your question, you can raise your hand via the react button, or you can just physically raise your hand if you'd like to do that as well at the end. So I'll leave that up to you. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. I'm going to pitch it to Anna first, can you just talk about what types of artist residencies are available and then how they differ? You can speak a little bit about the ones that ArtSpace has. I think you touched on that a little bit already, but if you can kind of expand on that.
Absolutely. So residencies, I think, are an absolutely wonderful way for artists to find themselves in their practice, whatever that may be. And they're structured in many different ways. As I mentioned at ArtSpace, we have two types of program. Our emerging artist and residency programs are longer, year-long residencies. And I'll elaborate on that in a moment. I'd say perhaps the most common type of residency you'll find throughout the country, and there are many. I think there's over 500 different artist residencies across the country, if not more. Are more project-based residencies where they're shorter term, anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to a month, where you're really more focused on a particular project. But I would say all residencies, I think, are of great benefit in that they are a wonderful way to connect you with other creative thinkers. It's a way for, I think, artists to really hone in on their own artistic vision and voice through connection. Sometimes that leads to collaboration with other artists. But in my mind, that seems to be sort of the overarching connection. I will say for me, with our longer year-long residencies, it's very important for me that those not be as focused on a particular project. There have been times where an artist comes in with a project in mind, and it has worked well. But I find for our emerging artist residency programs, the main impetus is to provide a sort of launch pad for artists who are at a transitional moment in their career, whether that's just sort of coming to grips with their own identity as an artist and honing their practice, or if it's someone who's perhaps had a life has taken them down a different path. They've perhaps had a family. That's something I encounter a lot, and need to sort of refocus on their art practice within our space. And what we provide at Art Space really is, in addition to the physical space to make the work, and as I'd mentioned, in our case, it's visual art, and we work with artists of many different medium. There are some restrictions at Art Space in terms of what can happen. But it's the space, it's the access to our community of artists, but it's also the access to our staff, which is made up of arts administrators from various backgrounds. So I, for example, am a big fan of coming and doing regular studio visits with our artists in residence, giving sort of critical feedback on the work. I also really love helping artists hone in their artist statements. Our president and CEO, Carly, provides a wealth of knowledge about grant opportunities. So it really is an opportunity to be within a community of artists and creatives, and to expand your networks and connections, and hone your craft.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much. And for folks here joining, I did drop the link here if you haven't looked at the ones that are actually available at ArtSpace, the ones that Anna was discussing a moment ago. So I would also just like to talk specifically, perhaps first I'll start with Michelle. Can you briefly describe like your residency experience? I know you've done a few already as an artist, but you can, speak to maybe one or two of those and what made those unique and what that experience was.
Sure, and each one of my residencies was kind of unique. I haven't had the same experience at any of them, so it's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
been that I've enjoyed that side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them has brought me networking opportunities, and starting late and not going to an art college,
Mm-hmm.
and teaching myself
Mm-hmm.
my own art path, then that the residencies has helped with that networking,
Mm-hmm.
which I've definitely needed. Um, I've done a long-term residency, which was with the Durham Art Guild. So I was able to stay at home and go into the Durham Art Guild. They gave me a studio, and that was 6 months, and that required a show at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So within 6 months, I had to create enough work to fill the Golden Belt space, which was definitely a challenge because that is not a small space when you actually have to fill it with art. But
Mm-hmm.
that also gave me the greatest networking opportunities, and it was really what you made of it. So if you didn't
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of the opportunities they provided, then you really were just there producing work for the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Great.
the the other two that I've done, which are more short term, is Penland School of Craft.
Mm-hmm.
I did their winter residency, which was only 2 weeks, and I'd chosen that because I was still in my full-time job and I could get 2 weeks off work. So that
Mm-hmm.
was easy. And then last year, my favorite residency so far was the Oxbow School of Arts up in Michigan, and they're tied with the Chicago Institute of Fine Art.
Mm-hmm.
And that was completely paid for, and there was no show or expectation to show work. It was just come and create and do whatever you like. And because they do credited summer programs, there was a lot of fellowships and stuff like that. So literally, I just had to get up in the morning and breakfast would be served by somebody else, and I could leave my dishes there for someone else
Wow.
to clean.
Yeah.
And I got accommodation in a studio with that. So I really enjoyed that, and the space was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then this year I've got um, one in France in June, and then I've got a collaborative. I was invited to do a collaborative residency at Pine Meadow Run
Mm-hmm.
in Oregon. Um, and the one in Michigan, someone just asked, is Oxbow School of Art.
I'm going to drop that in the chat here. I don't have the link for it, but I'm going to drop the name in the chat.
And that, they had 600 applications and they take 12 people for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one thing to know is applying for these residencies. There's lots of people applying with very few spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
just keep applying.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to come back to those things about the application because I want to talk a little bit more about that. But I'd also like to ask Shali what she thinks about her resident experience and anything that she can add that made her experience unique as well.
Similar to Michelle, every residency has been completely unique to itself. And that
Mm-hmm.
can, be because either maybe some residencies come with a requirement like a show afterwards. Some
Mm-hmm.
residencies are more exploratory and might involve community engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Some residencies you might get invited to, and some you apply for. So there are all different kinds of opportunities that are available at every step of the way. Um, I'm going to drop a couple of links into the chat about Fractured Atlas. They have a monthly newsletter. They are a nonprofit umbrella organization that offers fiscal sponsorship to independent artists so that you can apply for larger funding. And they send out a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter with upcoming residencies and what those residencies, and it's national and international. So some residencies are geared towards specific location and some towards specific craft and art form. Um, and also Creative Capital. Creative Capital has another email listserv that you can receive invitations to different kinds of applications for residencies. Um, I would say that locally, maybe I'll start locally with like a local experience and then I can go kind of more to my international experience. Azul and Wild Acres are two North Carolina-based residency programs that can be really supportive in terms of affordability. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I do have an unstable internet connection based on living out here. So if at any point in time I freeze, just let me know. I can also turn my video off if that helps the sound come through a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Nature of country life, but it's worth it for the trees. So Azul, Wild Acres were residency opportunities where you kind of have open space. Were no requirements. I knew that I would be researching material for the generation of new work. So I set my own schedule. I was able to achieve as much as I wanted to accomplish in that it was a week-long time frame.
Mm-hmm.
The Wild Acres was completely free. Azul was a minimal charge. And those were really supportive in terms of clearing the space, leaving your daily life, and going and setting aside time for self-care, which is really important for artists, to balance that with your creative process and a space that you feel safe enough to be creative and to explore. Azul is more of a shared space, so there was an opportunity to connect with other artists. And Wild Acres was a more kind of personal space so that you can go and be alone, literally in the woods with yourself and your craft. Other residency experiences that were pretty phenomenal were I was given the invitation to create a piece for Tokyo Wonder Site in Japan. And that was international collaboration with two other artists from the UK. And that led to us getting an extended residency and going to Cambridge University and doing an extended residency there and a public performance. And all of those international opportunities, to be fully transparent, came from Facebook and social media, which is a very interesting consideration in today's political climate. However, being I think as artists, I'm just going to speak for myself personally. I never really thought of um, how important putting yourself out there was, especially in the beginning of my career. But simply getting excited and sharing your work and sharing what I was doing got the attention of other people and led to a lot of different opportunities. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to note that some folks might be following your trajectory and excited about your work more than
Mm-hmm.
you realize, and then you might get an invitation just simply by expressing, and sharing with everyone in your community what you're up to. So that
Mm-hmm.
was a really incredible experience, and that kind of leads to a question that I think we'll probably talk about a little bit more, which is what is funded and not.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of when I did go abroad, that was a paid residency, and so those do exist. There are residencies that require applications, and then there are residencies that are invitation also. And then there are residencies like Azul and Wild Acres that I just applied for. So sometimes you can assert, I want this experience, like Michelle did. I want to go experience, this
Mm-hmm.
particular organization or location. It was an incredible way for me to travel. I spent time in Germany in a residency. I went to Belgium on a residency. So it was a wonderful way to embed yourself in different cultures, especially if it's, full of artists that you've dreamed of working with, or feel inspired by those particular locations. So it can really feed you too as an artist, just the sense of travel that's possible with it. And then all the way to more local, kind of low stress, low stakes kind of environments. It's kind of whatever is feeding you and you're needing in the moment to further your practice.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Just kind of talking more about the selection process. But before we get to that, you talked a little bit, you both did, about some that are free to attend, and some of them that have some financial responsibility from the artist. Can you talk a little bit about how an artist can kind of financially support themselves with that, or what opportunities are they to get financial support with grants, etc.? What would they need to know in order to support themselves for a residency opportunity?
I- I'll speak a little bit to that, but I think
Hmm.
Michelle and Shali, you might be able to speak more.
Yeah.
I will say your local arts councils often have some sort of funding streams that you can apply for. So a project grant, for example, here in Wake County from the United Arts Council of Wake County can be applied for a residency. There's the Durham Arts Council. I think the tricky part with that I've been hearing feedback from more artists is you have to sort of take the risk of applying and getting a residency first and maybe making that commitment before you know that you're going to have that financial support. Sometimes the timelines don't work it out as well. I will say in the past, the funding streams have allowed for some of that ambiguity. I've heard, artists can apply and say, this is my intention. I don't yet know if I'll have this residency. And sometimes they're okay with that and sometimes they're not. So I would encourage artists to always apply. It to some degree it can depend on who's on that panel determining how to distribute the funds, if they're okay with a level of uncertainty. So I would always encourage you to apply, especially if it's there's no fee with that. Many residencies also have some sort of either work study or they may offer a scholarship, and many residencies do pay stipends. So I mean it's a lot of information. There's a resource called the Alliance of Artist Communities, and I'll drop that in the chat, where you can sort of search nationwide residencies that are available and sort of filter out the ones that maybe provide you a stipend, the ones you might pay. But I would say ultimately a lot of it is budgeting, thinking really realistically about what it means to put your life on hold for a couple weeks to a month, and seeing where you can get resources. But those are some that I can think of.
Okay, perfect. Um, do you have anything else to add to that, Michelle?
Yes, southarts.org also has grants, but it is pretty heavy on the paperwork. So just a FYI, if you go into it, expect a lot of paperwork at the end. But I've started, I mean, there's usually a application fee, but I have started looking at residencies that are pretty much all paid for. Either given to me free and all I have to do is work out how to get there, or they also provide a stipend there's quite a few out there that will provide a stipend for when you're away, like having to still pay your rent or studio fees still and things like that, or daycare, whatever you need to be able to come, as well as a housing stipend. So it just depends on what you need, but there's plenty out there that you can look for that suit your needs.
Mhm. Great. Regarding the actual application process, Anna, can you talk a little bit about, perhaps, I know you can speak for Art Space, but just in general, what the selection committees typically are looking for in the applications, just in general, what an artist needs to make sure they have kind of in their information before they even start applying?
Absolutely. So, I'd say it's pretty standard to have a artist statement, a general statement about your practice, your perspective as an artist, which should touch on both your sort of conceptual frameworks that you navigate within, but also your processes. And often, I mean, we certainly ask for sort of a statement of interest, or in other words, why this residency, right? And so I think it's really important for artists, and this can be hard because going back to what Michelle's saying with the paperwork, you may apply for 10 and get one or two, and it can be it's a lot. I'm sorry, I have dogs that are making noises. But it is important to be as specific as possible. If you can imagine yourself or imagine your work within this particular environment, and yes, look for the residencies that can provide you financial support. That's real, and
Yeah.
it can be acknowledged in that statement. But try and think beyond that. So, for example, if you were to apply for the Oxbow residency in Michigan, does your work sort of involve the landscape? Is there something about that particular place, or is it that this is a residency that brings together artists from all over the country and it's an opportunity for you to expand your network? Really try and think specifically about imagining yourself within that space when you write your statement of interest. And then finally, you'll want a resume and then image samples or work samples, whatever your media may be. And I'd say it's really important that you are presenting a professional, well documented presentation of your work. You want to make sure that there's a level of consistency, that your images are supporting what you've said in your writing, and vice versa. I think sometimes artists want to show the breadth of what they can do in their images. And I think it's much more important that you're painting a really clear picture of who you are, what you're going to bring to this program, and then how this program is going to help support what it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you think of something that artists sometimes is a common mistake you might see when someone is applying for a residency?
Yeah, I mean, the most common is the one I was harping on, is not really thinking about the specificity of that program, and
Mm-hmm.
how they see themselves fitting in there, and how the resources of that particular program are going to help them. So I mean, I think as much as you can make that connection, it really
Mm-hmm.
will resonate, because I see artists often either glossing over that or not addressing it at all. And then the second thing that I would say is a pitfall is images. Just making sure that you have some good images. They don't have to be something that you've spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on professional
Yeah.
photographs, although those do. I am a proponent of that when you're at a certain level, but just having consistency, properly cropping your images to really put your best foot forward. Those are the two things that I see most often that I think artists could improve on.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Michelle, can you speak to, you talked a little bit about it, but can you give some information or about how the residency or or the ones that you've attended has impacted your practice or your career so far?
Yeah, can I first go back and
Oh,
add
sure,
to Anna's
absolutely.
thing?
Yeah.
Um, and your artist statement and your portfolio are incredibly important, as well as
Mhm.
looking at the questions and thinking about thoughtful questions
Yeah.
and answers to those questions, because someone was asking about non-competitive residencies. I'm going to be honest, there's no such thing. Residencies
Yeah.
today are core for a lot of artists. And so I think Durham Art Guild was the only one that I applied for that was less than 100 people had applied.
Mhm.
And that's because it's 6 months and it's really tied to more local artists. Um, and as an emerging artist, like I said, it was important for networking. I will say Oxbow, I got in there because they are very focused on community. And I answered the questions based on the fact that they had a folk community and was thoughtful about my answer. I recently reviewed applications for a residency, and the number one downfall was either a weak portfolio that didn't match their artist statement, like Anna said, all over the place, or their questions about the answers to their questions just didn't match what we were looking for because they hadn't read the questions properly to put the right answers in. So it was really important. The application process is really something you need to take time answering and even putting into a Word doc first, because if that page refreshes, you lose all your answers a lot of the time. But
Yeah.
putting into a Word doc, thinking about what they're looking for, doing your research, and maybe even talking to a couple of others that have done the residency before. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important.
Yeah, those are all great tips. Thank you for sharing that, for adding that information, Michelle. Um,
And what was
yeah, the impact
your
to your career. Yeah, I mean, what can you say has been one or two things that that you've seen that clearly impacted your career from your time, your practice at residencies?
um so I used to work in corporate world, and I used to
Mm-hmm.
tell my employees it starts off with what you know, and then it becomes who you know once you get further along. And I feel it's
Yeah.
almost the same way in
Yeah.
that in any realm. So the reason,
Mm-hmm.
because I networked in my residencies and treated it as partly as a job, not just a residency.
Mm-hmm.
I made connections that I probably wouldn't have made anywhere else.
Yeah.
Part of that was I met somebody from Raleigh Arts and was able to sell a piece this year to Raleigh Arts,
Mm-hmm.
because of that connection through the residency. I've also been this year, I'm showing every month except for August somewhere um, in the world. And a lot of that is because of connections I've made through residency, so that I'm now invited to those shows versus
Mm-hmm.
having to apply all the time. Um, and then I've got some amazing people that I network with, socialize with, that are
Mm-hmm.
supporting artists that I wouldn't be able to uh, do this full time if I didn't have those support from other artists. Um, and that artist network and that support has been amazing during the residencies.
Great. Thank you. Shali, can you add more to that about the impact of the residencies on your practice or career?
Yes, and I think I can also, while doing that, kind of speak to Aram's question about performing
Yes.
artists
Mm-hmm.
because I am a performing artist, so all the residencies that I've done have been geared towards either a collaboration with different kinds of artists, like which can be a really big component to international residencies that are focused on kind of international collaborative kind of opportunities. And then also the residencies that are about creating new work or about, dedicated towards your practice. Um, I just want to also say to everyone the best advice I was ever given about applications, and that would be applications for funding, for residencies, for any kind of opportunities, is that if you don't hear no, you're not asking enough. And that completely changed my perspective. It was just like it gave me so much freedom. So, because I was, a tender young artist that would get my feelings hurt with rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I learned that is it, it's not really a rejection. It's kind of more about what Michelle and Anna were talking about. It's about specificity. Every organization and every opportunity is looking for a particular kind of artist or a particular kind of engagement or even particular kind of work. There will be residencies based on location. I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's one at national parks that artists of all, from performance artists to any kind of folk life artists, creators, makers, shakers, can apply for creating work that's based on the locations of different national parks. There's even one in Hawaii, which looks really amazing. And I believe that that does also come with funding. So I think for me, what had really changed my trajectory of my career is that through residencies, having the opportunity to travel internationally actually gave my work more credibility locally. The work that I've done in New York City gave me more credibility locally. I could perform at and do a residency at a hole in the wall in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and suddenly I'm on the map and it's in, the timeout section of, this thing happened. And then I can perform at a wonderfully large proscenium theater in North Carolina, and it just doesn't get the same kind of coverage. So there's something about the leverage of upliftment and the platform of someone invested in you, someone said yes to you, and then that kind of creates a little bit of momentum because all of this is built on relationships. And what people are really looking at, and the reason consistency is important in applications is, do we know who this person is? Can we trust this person? You're going to be engaging with living space. So it becomes also a negotiation of trust building through the application process. The other part about it that is kind of an unexpected celebration of the experience is being a dancer. Language speaking is not my first, I can't, it's not my thing, right? I move because dance is its own language. So having to enter into the world of getting all of these thoughts and ideas on paper was a real big journey for me. It went from thinking that I needed to talk myself up really big to just like trying to figure out what do people want and can I get all of this in the right direction to kind of going through the process of, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm about. And then looking for opportunities that actually will uplift that. And opportunities where there's a mutual engagement, like there's a mutual benefit from them hosting me and from me choosing them. So you're choosing each other. And that's kind of a beautiful thing too, because you're cultivating relationships that hopefully will serve you in the future. Sometimes residencies become NPN partnerships, which is a National Performance Network partnership that then leads to financial engagement, an extended residency, and a performance opportunity. Sometimes the people that come to your talkbacks at these events will invite you to, when I was in Japan, I was invited to Female Dancers in Tokyo Week because someone came to an open showing that I was doing. So there's something about also going through my own shyness to really engaging with people and community and letting that kind of become more like a meandering. So it's not a one-time kind of thing. It will build, it will cultivate relationships, partnerships, future opportunities, and deepen your practice. So it becomes a part of the pathway of a maker's life experience. Anyone in the creative arts, and that's from performance to visual. I hope that answers your question. I'm really excited about the two opportunities that I dropped in there, Creative Capital and Fractured Atlas. They will be very specific, like this is for sculptors, this is for dancers, this is multimedia. And then the other thing too, like when I went to Azul, they have a dance space there, but you could use it for anything. You could use it for yoga, physical practice. When I went to Wild Acres, it was a cabin, and I just asked for the dimensions so I knew if I would have enough space to move. So it is possible also to go into spaces that don't necessarily advertise themselves as performance spaces and ask about dimensions and see if that will work for your practice.
Perfect. I think, let's see, I think we had a couple of questions. I think those have been answered. in the chat. Do we have any additional questions? Does anyone else have additional questions that they need to ask that we maybe haven't answered so far that you wanted to answer or ask in the chat or ask us directly?
Can
No?
I say,
Yeah.
Tiffany, that just because you apply once and you don't get in shouldn't be the end of that application.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Originally when I applied for Oxbow, a friend of mine from Penland had actually told me, "Oh, you need to start applying because it takes like 5 years before they accept applicants." I mean, I
Yeah.
was lucky, and I got in the first year, but sometimes it takes, 3 to 4 times to apply before
Hmm.
um, you actually get it. And it's not because of a weak portfolio, it may not be because of a weak portfolio or anything. You can always ask for feedback and also you can also meet with the people that are running the residency up front before you submit to make sure you have the right application.
Yeah.
I,
Those are really great points. Go ahead, Anna.
yeah, I mean, I was just gonna reiterate that. Like, I can't emphasize how important that is. Shawley, to your point, if you don't get here, no, you're not asking enough. And the same, I mean, this goes back to Aram's question and Maggie too. I think about performance, or if you're working in a media that maybe doesn't fit within a neat category. So like the Alliance of Artists Communities that I mentioned, the resources that Shawley's shared, where they sort of break it into categories. If you don't see yourself neatly fitting into one of those spaces, ask. I have more than once been willing to work with artists who maybe aren't quite a visual artist in the sort of traditional sense of the medium. We make it work if the artist and the project is compelling enough. So it can be scary to put yourself out there, and you do risk getting a no, but I just can't emphasize enough how important that is to ask. And I think more than not, those of us working um as administrators in the creative field at these institutions, we take so much inspiration from what artists are doing. And if I can make something work within my space, I'm going to make it work, even if it doesn't neatly fit into that category. So don't assume something's not for you until you've heard that no multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. We have a couple of questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead and address those now and kind of continue the conversation here. Um, Maggie asked, how do you screen for artist residencies that are legitimate versus being exploitative? Does anyone, would either of you like to take
I
that
would
on?
love to jump on that. I see Michelle's
Sure.
ready to jump on it too. I was going to say form of like payment. Payment is
Uh-huh.
an application fee. That's already setting up a dynamic in terms of what these
Mm-hmm.
organizations value. So if it's a really
Mm-hmm.
high application and you have to pay to be there, then you have to kind of ask yourself, is this the platform that will uplift my career and it's worth an investment versus is this organization investing in me? So I think it has a lot to do with how they uplift you, or not. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of sets up a power dynamic of just, the finances. But I will also say, there's a thing too where you can be an artist in residence locally.
Mm-hmm.
When I lived in New York City and I needed space, I reached out to an art space. We created a kind of a trade agreement, and I became the artist in residence there. So there are opportunities that you can create yourself, kind of like Anna was saying. So it's not, you don't have to give them all the power, is what I want to say. If you know an
Mm-hmm.
artist residency is right for you, you can make it happen. There are ways to make it happen also.
Mm-hmm.
But I think looking at those kind of dynamics as to what really truly will serve you And sometimes it's the opportunity is worth the investment. I mean, when I went to Belgium, I ate a carton of eggs. That was my grocery budget, and it was worth it.
I was going to say, I found a lot of my opportunities now through Instagram, just following. What I've done is I see other artists that I know that I've met through other residencies, and
Mm-hmm.
then see what other residencies they apply for so that I
Yeah.
follow those same residencies.
Mm-hmm.
I also got to meet at Oxbow the visiting artist, and she gave me great advice. She's a Guggenheim Fellow, and she gave me great advice on a couple of other residencies to apply for. So I usually base my residencies based on other people I know that have received it. Especially, you never
Mm-hmm.
know in social media world what's real and what's not. Um,
Right.
and if they start asking that, to Shaylee's point, if they start asking about giving a piece of work at the end so that they keep it, then I that would raise questions for me as well, not only high cost, but also asking for you to leave work behind and things like that. You've really got to question what value you get out of
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are great points because I know we talked earlier about finding that there may be opportunities to find on social media and online. And that's a great point to, check out what other artists that have received residencies and kind of use that as an opportunity to find out what residencies are available and that are legitimate for you as an artist. So thank you. We have another question. What stage of development as an artist in your medium should you be in to apply for a fellowship that is offered to you?
I mean, I would encourage an artist at any level to apply
Mm-hmm.
for funding, for a fellowship, for residencies. But I mean, I think you need to be at a point where you're really serious about it, where you're owning your identity as an artist, where it's not just something that you enjoy doing, but that you are have a drive to make work,
Mm-hmm.
and you need support in doing that. Apply. I think
Mm-hmm.
at any level, honestly. And I think you'll find that the support you need may change. You may get more specific with it. Um, but I think an artist at any level should apply, certainly.
I mean, I was an
Michelle?
emerging artist. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
literally had 0 days under my belt when I applied for Finland. But I did have, so I'd been quilting for about 8 years before I decided to move into the quilting world. So I had a strong enough portfolio. And I think that's part of it. A lot of the times they say 5 to 10 images. And what kills me as a quilter, it takes me about a year to make a quilt. So when they say, can I have 10 images that you've made in the last 2 years, that's really hard. And a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times I just explain why if I've only got like 5 images. And to be honest, depending on your medium, I think it can actually it's having a time limit on your body of work makes it a little hard.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anytime. I mean, the Durham Art Guild residency what is for emerging artists, and so is the art space one that's local. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think there's any wrong time to apply. Like Anna said, your focus might change. You may look for more project-based residencies if you've been doing it longer, because you have a specific project in mind that you want to get out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. We're almost approaching 1 p.m. Do we have any additional questions um, from folks? You can pop them in the chat or you can raise your hand. If not, we will, if I don't see any additional questions, if you guys, if Michelle or Anna, oh, let's see, we got some messages that came in. Okay. If you wanted to give any closing remarks or any final tips or advice.
Take the risk.
Yes.
I mean, the worst that's going to happen is you get a no, and then you can just apply again. Or it's cost factor to consider. I'll be honest, I spent $410 last year on applying for exhibitions, residencies, and grants. So there is a cost factor to keep in mind. So I don't really apply for more than two per year, and I've got a smarter. I've got long and targeted ones that I really want to participate in versus not knowing what I was doing to start out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see. We had a question. I'm sorry. We had a question from Aaron. I'll let you go ahead and speak to that the point you were going to make, Anna, and then we can get to this question from Aaron.
Yeah, well, and I can address that to some degree too, Aaron. I mean, I was gonna come
Okay.
back to that sort of exploitative thing. One other
Okay.
thing that really hasn't come up that much is that I think is so important, and I think it can address this question as well, is, when you're applying, if you receive a residency or an offer, it's really crucial to make sure that the mutual expectations are established. And that should come in the form of both some sort of contract, because whether you're getting paid or not, or you've decided to make an investment in this experience, you are giving a lot of yourself to this program, and you should be getting things in return. And I think that's just so important, and it can be a very just a conversation. Like, I mean, you can just ask that question: what are the expectations of me if I get this? And like, if you are someone who is more introverted and the residency involves a lot of social, like many of them have sort of communal meal times. I know, Michelle, you mentioned a residency that involved that. That may not be the best fit for you. Then there's others that it's more about sort of you might be introverted, and communicating that to whoever's leading the residency is important. So I've worked with hundreds of artists through our residencies over the years, and many of them are very introverted, and it's hard for them to sort of take advantage of that networking opportunity. Not all artists are like Michelle, willing to make that effort and introduce themselves and initiate those things. So I think asking that up front is important. I, as an administrator, try and make a point to sort of get to know my residents early on and figure that out. And it's a question I ask: are you more introverted? Would it be helpful if I arranged for you to have some visits? And I'm willing to do that. I don't know how many administrators are going to come out up front and ask that of participants. So I do think, like, knowing that, asking what those expectations are, and communicating what you hope to get out of it, and how whoever is administrating that program can help you to achieve that, is really important. And so I think part of it is making yourself vulnerable and putting yourself out there and making connections, which can be really challenging. But I think also some of it is sort of asking for help with aspects of that, so that you really are able to get the most out of the opportunity. Yeah.
Great.
And I was
I'd like to
gonna
share too. Oh, go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead.
so I did say I treat it as a job. I am actually an introvert at heart. Networking is exhausting. Um, I go home and I don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
But make the best thing I've done is partner with somebody else that is in the residency program. So and Anna knows, in my Durham Art Guild residency, I had two fabulous other artists, Sanjay James and Delana Robbins, and we would just go to events together and talk on behalf of each other. So it's a hard practice to start talking about yourself. It's my least favorite thing to do, is talking about myself and my art. But if you go with friends, those friends can talk about your art better than you can. And so I talk about Delana, Sanjay might talk about me. So find those key people that will support you and lift your voice.
I was just going to
That's
add to
great.
that that networking kind of has can happen on different levels. I think because I'm very introverted as well, and the networking that served me really well was actually just sharing my experience through my social media channels. And that worked very well. And there are certain residencies that require more community engagement, and then there's some that don't require any. So there are different kinds of residencies for that too. Some residencies are specifically for you to have that personal time and space. And maybe you're meeting them when you first arrive, and maybe you have a dinner over the course of the entire time you're there. But it really is unique to the organization. And, you know, kind of like what Anna was sharing too, these organizations are supporting artists because they want to support their process. So even with Anna asking the question to folks like, are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Can I connect you to the community? Would you rather, you know, just be in your work mode? There are a lot of organizations that really want to work with you, and that can be kind of addressed in a LOA, a letter of engagement. Some residencies will have certain requirements, and then some will have none at all. So there really is an opportunity to kind of navigate that in a way that works best for you. But I was not always going to all of the socials. But just by sharing my experience, that gave me the networking that I needed in the beginning. I've learned to be more extroverted because I'm equally passionate about people and community. So, but like Michelle, that means I'll probably, you know, go home and be alone afterwards and really quiet, because that's how we kind of recharge after, you know, being kind of very public. And you know, that self-care is really important. You know, that's what artist residencies are really about. They're about nurturing you as a person and your craft. So learning your limits and being able to communicate those when there is that kind of demand for public engagement can be really helpful and supportive. And then having friends that are good for it and that can speak to you and your experience can be supportive also. Um, and then just doing it in a way that works for you is I think a really healthy way for any artist to approach designing your own career, because we have to realize that, you know, in the art world, you have the career that you create for yourself. So you're creating your own path. You know, it's like the Emerson quote, you know, don't follow the path, and, you know, don't follow the path, create your own and leave a trail. That I don't think I would have ever had a career if I had followed a typical trajectory. And it sounds like with Michelle, you know, self-choosing her own path too. So you get to make all of these choices along the way. What do I want this to look like? And that's an important way to flip the script. You're not just applying for something, you're choosing the kind of trajectory you want for your career. So that can be a really empowered approach.
It's a great point. Thank you so much. I think this will conclude the questions. On behalf of Triangle Artworks, I would like to thank our panelists for joining us and providing such valuable information to our community. And I will let everyone know that the recording will go up on our ArtSwell TV channel. And as a registered participant, you will receive that information as an email once it's been published. So if you want to share with your friends that may have not been able to join, if you think the information would be helpful to them, we'd love for you to do that. So thank you all so much for being with us, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.